I wish good things to you who's watching this. I am Alexey and I have a special game to show you today, not only because of what happened in the game and because of the outcome, but because of who was playing. So as you can see, it's one of my games, but my opponent is the player with the screen named Nallerheim, who's currently the Finnish national champion. We've played many casual games with this player, but it's the only time I've ever played somebody who's rated above 800 whilst being rated above 800 myself. Well, why is this such a big deal? There have been around 20 players overall who have crossed the 800 rating threshold on Board Game Arena in Carcassonne at some point in their life, at least once in their life. But usually at any given moment, there's only one or two people rated over 800 on Board Game Arena, and they don't normally play each other, or at least I hadn't seen this before until now. So to the best of my knowledge, this is the highest ranked matchup that had ever occurred on Board Game Arena with an average rating of 810.5. Just a reminder, the threshold for Master is 700, which is over 110 points below the average rating in this match. So you could probably expect a close high-level game. But let's see. I actually get to go first here. I grab the monastery, which is great for me. My opponent starts a new city. I start a new city myself. Now my opponent gets a straight line, starts a road in the only possible spot. Now I get a monastery. Of course, I will be meepling the monastery, but I have a choice of several spots. So one is, I could go over here for sure, which certainly looks enticing, and I get to control two of my opponent's features. But I just went for the stacking approach, trying to score many points myself. Green here finishes a road, gets the first 3 points on the scoreboard. I get to continue my city and monastery at the same time. Green takes 2 points and with the same time sets a blocking spot next to my monastery. So this square is now super vulnerable. With any city tile, green will be able to make sure that I never get this meeple back. So as yellow, I would need to address it, but it's not something I can do now, really. I just start a new city whilst continuing my own, and green now has to do something about that city, because if green doesn't do that, then I was only 2 tiles away from finishing the city, and that would have served me a lot of points. Now here I have an interesting choice. So I get a very good defense. Now, I could put it over here, I guess, where it neatly fits, but actually that would not be a very good move because the square next to this tile would still be vulnerable and it would still be possible to complete the block. So the only moves I'm debating really is this, which is like really a high variance approach. It creates an evil hamster spot next to my monastery, and if I get it, then I probably just win. I score 9 extra points, get my meeple back. If my opponent gets it, well, he equalizes one of the monasteries. So this is an approach, but I went for the low variance approach, just pre-building a road instead. There was also logic that if I draw one of the 3 remaining T-shaped crossroads, by the way, this reminds me that we should turn on the tile counter back. If I get, let's say, the T-shaped crossroads, I get to pre-complete my monastery and also start building a very nice road. But not yet, because I don't get this tile. Green takes more points. Now I have some options. I could probably go over here and tie this city to my monastery, but then the idea of meepling this road, it's not really going to work. So instead, I just decided to attack my opponent's city simply to equalize it. Green takes 2 points and puts a city cap next to my monastery. Here's the interesting thing, right? I could meeple the city cap straight away, and it leaves a monastery spot next to my monastery, which is nice, but then it could take a while for me to get that. So instead, I decided to go for this approach, where I have multiple cities open. I'm almost completing the monastery. If I get a triangle, I get 8 points over here, and if I get a city cap, I get 4 points at the bottom. There are many tiles with which I can get good stuff. Again, still, if I get a road tile, I get to place it over here and pre-meeple the 5-point road, and the monastery spot has not disappeared because now I have another monastery spot at the bottom. Lately, I've much more often started, instead of taking 4-point cities, pre-building 6-point cities to make sure that I can use triangle-shaped city tiles productively. There's 10 of those in the deck, and you want to make sure that you can use every tile productively. But it has a downside. When you take 4 points straight away, you get your meeple back, and the points are on your scoreboard, and nobody can take them away. But here, this city is slightly vulnerable. The good news for me is that the city is vulnerable only from one side, because my opponent is not going to go over here and try to attack this city, because they will be adding 1 more point to my monastery. Instead, what they can do, they can only go to the left, score 2 points for the road, or maybe grab a curve and start a ring road, and only then create an attacking platform for the city. But given that there are 8 triangles remaining and 2 city splitters remaining, I am quite likely to finish this before the city gets attacked. They do something interesting. They actually equalize my meeple at the bottom, and it's not something that is normally the best play. The best play is normally to turn the city cap facing downwards and having an advantage of an unrestricted city cap versus your opponent's restricted city cap. But the reason they're doing this now is because they recognize that I'm short on meeples. So they want to keep me without meeples at the expense of their own meeples. And here it's just works out like a charm, because I had a tile, the extender, which I really can no longer use productively. So I can only think of this move, I guess, which sort of kind of starts blocking the square that my opponent can use for the connection. But then the downside is that the square next to my monastery becomes more vulnerable as a result. Another option that I could do is go over here and prepare to block this meeple over here, but it is a bit too slow. So I went for the first option at the expense of the security of my monastery. My opponent starts a new monastery by themselves, and here is a tricky situation. So I have a city cap. I need to use this city cap. I could go over here and start a new city, which I rather like, and maybe it's something that is worth doing. There's some problems with this though. So if my opponent gets a triangle, then I kind of get a restricted city cap, which is not ideal, and there's still 3 regular triangles remaining. Also, my opponent could prolong this city over here, trying to block my meeple. Overall, it's definitely not a bad move, but the main reason why I didn't do that is that I would urgently need a triangle for this move, right? Like super urgently. But I also need a triangle over here. So then I would need a triangle in 2 places. So instead I went for this move, starting a city at the bottom, but also almost completing my monastery. In fact, I'm only 1 tile away from completing my monastery, 1 tile from completing my city at the bottom, 1 tile from completing my city at the left. So the fact that I don't have meeples at the moment does not really matter that much. Green makes a strong move. They attack my city indirectly. Well, they create an attacking platform against my city, but they also get 1 extra monastery point, and they pre-build the 3-point road. There's still 5 crossroads remaining and more road finishing tiles remaining, and they can use them to take 3 points and restrict my city. And here I thought for a long time, there are several moves that I could do. I could just kind of go here and try to block the square. The problem if I do that, then my opponent can grab another city tile and maybe reconnect to the city, and suddenly I'm fighting to keep parity in the city I was recently ahead. I could go here kind of trying to finish this city with a city cap. And maybe this was even the best move because it restricts the road a little bit, and that's kind of nice. But then, let's say if my opponent gets a road tile and they score 3 points, then I get a curve. I'm forced to place the curve over here, and it makes both of my cities vulnerable, and that's kind of not ideal. So I went for the other option. I went over here trying to eat up a city, and my point was I only really need one of these meeples back soon enough. Again, there's still many triangles remaining, and just as I was about to complete the city, my opponent scores 3 quick points, and now I am in a bit of trouble. This meeple is not necessarily vulnerable, but my meeples are essentially frozen because I cannot finish my monastery right now. I cannot go over here because there's still 7 curves remaining. There are loads of tiles that both put pressure on the city at the bottom and immediately block my city on the left. So actually I should wait for a triangle to finish my city first and only then complete my monastery. So that's a bit tricky, but that's fine. We can get our meeples back elsewhere. I add 1 monastery point. My opponent starts attacking my city at the bottom. There's nothing much that I can do about it, but at least I can get a meeple back. Now, there is a bit of a disadvantage here, because ideally I would have loved to make that move and place the meeple on the road, but instead this 8 points, 6 point road will be empty, and we're essentially just flipping for one of the triple cities with a crossroads. So whoever gets this lucrative tile first will score 6 points. Now my opponent has a bunch of interesting choices here. They could score 2 points, which is honestly what I would do, but instead they make a really interesting move. They make a move that gives them tempo. They go over here and drop a farmer. Now, there are some upsides and downsides. Well, first of all, the upside is sometimes I draw garbage, and then they're able to block my city meeple. But the downside is that by trying to block 2 meeples at once, they can free up my meeples a little more easily. So let's say if I get a curve instead of what I got, then I get to place the curve over here, get my monastery meeple back, and at the same time indirectly protect my city meeple on the left, because that would be restricting the blocking square, and the only way they would be able to block was with a crossroads, and chances are that I will be able to draw the triangle before they get a crossroads. The upside for them from their move is that when I do get to complete the city, and of course I immediately do that, I could not drop a farmer, and suddenly they have a really, really nice looking field. It's just beautiful. It's 6 points, loads of open squares. They're about to finish one more city. It's just fantastic. Now they are forced to attack my city, and I have several options here. They are forced to attack my city because I was threatening to snatch easy 10 points, and in this situation they should absolutely be willing to spend their last meeple on neutralizing such a severe threat. Now here I could just go for points. I could go over here, grab this 6 point road and continue it, but since they don't have meeples, I'm in no rush. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to do what they did to me a few moves ago when I didn't have meeples. I'm going to try and restrict their options. So at the expense of adding 1 monastery point, I start the city over here. They do get the tile that they need immediately. However, I'm able to restrict their city a little bit. Well, not restrict, but just turn it into a ruin, essentially. After adding the quadruple city tile, it will be very hard for them to finish. They now complete the city connection. On the other side, there's not much that I can do. I just scored 2 points, restrict their city even further. They finish their monastery, and now it's a tricky decision for me. On one hand, this would be a very strong move, right? I get to have a city meeple back, I get extra points, I start building a road, which works well. But there's some problems with that move. It's mainly about the road, because you see, either I place the meeple on the road or I don't. If I don't place the meeple on the road, my opponent grabs a curve and in 2 moves time gets easy 6 points. If I do place a meeple on the road, then my opponent grabs a city plus road tile and severely restricts my meeple, because there are only 2 crossroads remaining, and chances are they would be able to complete the block, and I could really use the meeples here. So instead, I just decided to take easy 6 points on the right, and also to prevent my opponent from doing so. I thought that was quite useful, but there are some downsides. First of all, here I was actually a bit surprised at what my opponent played. I mean, this move certainly makes sense. They do get the splitter, and they get a meeple back, which I guess didn't work out that great for me. But, you know, had I not done this, what I did, had I not given them the extra city tile, they would have used the splitter tile to attack this city on the right, and that would have been quite painful as well. Even though there are relatively few triangles remaining, there are only 4, the upside of them snatching the city was just so huge that they would probably be willing to do that. Now, this was a turn that I spent quite a bit. I'm still not sure that I found the best move. I figured that I have 2 cities open in vulnerable positions, so most often only one of these meeples survives, but most often at least one of these meeples survives. So I can place my other meeple to do something else. Now, there's no way how I can complete this connection, because that would be reckless. My opponent could have a city cap, and they could go over here and restrict my monastery and try to snatch the city. So instead, I went for this move. The idea is to build a ruin. It will be worth at least 9 points, probably a little bit more, and in some scenarios I even get to complete the city, which would be super nice for me. And at the very least, I want to allocate my opponent's resources on, you know, thwarting this new threat as opposed to going after my smaller cities. Another thing, it all comes down to a more broad principle. When your opponent has a field, you want to create a ruin. You actually want to have something else in the game that is of equal importance than the field, or is more important than the field, just so that your opponent feels, say, small. So at the moment, even though it looks like it has great potential, it still has only 6 points. It's not a very valuable feature. So that's why I'm trying to build up a ruin and to divert my opponent's attention to the ruin as opposed to the field. So they, of course, are trying to thwart the connection. With this tile, there's really not much that I can do. I decided to restrict my opponent's little city piece over here a little bit. My opponent starts a new city, restricting my own city. I immediately get the tile, so I get a meeple back and I get 6 points. Will I even get my second meeple back? Well, you'll see the answer soon enough. My opponent now plays a very strong move. So most players would play a move like this. The idea being, you know, you're adding 2 points to your city, you're actually making it ever so slightly less vulnerable, but instead they add only 1 point to their ruin. In all likelihood, that's a ruin. But with this move, they're setting up something sinister. And it's something that I cannot really prevent. All I can do is just grab my meeple back, in addition with 1 monastery point, and just as I had the city tile in hand to free up my meeple, they complete their combo by blocking my meeple completely. And the reason why this meeple is blocked completely because all the starting tiles, all the tiles that fit into this square, they're gone. And this move was not just an attempt to continue their city. This move was actually setting up this block. It's something that I saw during the game, but I could not really see how to do much about it. And after I had my meeples blocked, I kind of thought that maybe I'm not that ahead anymore. Okay, I am +7, but my opponent does have 6 points on the field, so I'm really only +1. And then my opponent has a nice ruin, and they're probably going to get a meeple back from the city. So it's close, and maybe I'm even behind a couple of points. And here I believe that I did not necessarily play optimally the next couple of moves. In hindsight, probably the best move is to just start a city over here, like restricting your opponent's option, or even to tie your opponent's city. But I figured there were reasons why it's not good to have your meeple tangled. But given the large number of city caps, I should probably have started a city. Instead, I went for a different idea. I just added 1 point to myself and wanted to create some more threats. My opponent gets to complete their city. Again, something that would have been actually less dangerous had I started a new city over there. And again, I proceed with my plan now. My plan is sort of to threaten not only the takeover, but also the completion of my city. But actually, my plan did not work that well necessarily. And the idea being, I am creating one more square to attack this city, making it more vulnerable. I figured that it wouldn't matter that much because really the main square that could hurt me is at the top, so I'm not necessarily making my city much worse. But the main reason why I probably should not have done that is that threatening the completion of the city was not important. If I manage to snatch the ruin and keep it in the form of a ruin, then I probably can win the game. So that's why my opponent, instead of finishing their city at the top, started blocking the city. And now there are only 2 tiles remaining that fit there. One of them is the splitter, which would give me 8 points and a meeple back, but it would also create 2 completed cities on my opponent's field. So I did not want to go here and defend, because I figured I would defend late char maybe for something else. If I grab some city tile, I finish a city over here, and then maybe I draw the case triple city and try, keep this ruin a lucrative ruin. So instead, I tried attacking my opponent's city, but they did get the straight line and immediately completed the block, using the square that I had created for them. So now I have an interesting choice here again. I can either finish my own city, not finish, but continue my own city, which is probably the best move, or I could go over here and tie my opponent's city. And both moves have some legitimacy to them, but there's a problem that if my opponent draws some sort of tile to restrict my city, let's say even if they get something as simple as a curve, they place it next to my city, and then suddenly out of the 6 city caps that were remaining, only 3 of them are good enough for me, and it will be quite a wait for me to get a meeple back. So I decided to continue my own city, but of course the problem is that my opponent gets their meeple back. So not much that we could have done, and now it looks like I'm not in great shape for this game at all, so I just tried to restrict my opponent's field and city further, and well, let's see what we can do with that. They start a new city, I finish my other city. Now I'm slightly ahead on the scoreboard. I have meeples, they get 2 points. With my move, I also don't have much more than 2 points. So this is exactly what I score. They draw a straight line, and now I played a move which I think was the best move in this situation, but it was actually quite hard to find. Their field is worth 6 points, but if they complete the city, it's going to be worth 9 points. And if they draw the one remaining curve and put it over here, they're going to bring one more city into the field, and it's going to be 12 points. So I decided to try and deal with many things at the same time. I went over here and dropped a farmer. Now there are several ideas. One is that I'm trying to connect to the field, of course. The other one, I'm having 2 empty city caps in my field, and in case my connection is miraculously unsuccessful, it is still possible for my opponent to block this connection. Then I can use the city caps to grow my field at the top. And there's a third reason, of course. I want to do everything I can to prevent my opponent from finishing his cities. So my opponent decides to just calmly get 3 more points into his field, making it even more important for me to connect to this field. And I could just go all in on the field, try to attack it from this side, like this, drop a farmer here, then connect at the top, connect at the bottom. The problem is, if my opponent finishes the city, the field is not going to be enough. My opponent is going to score points. So I instead went over here, which is a super important move because there are no triangles remaining. And my opponent, in fact, is extremely unlikely to complete this city. They can probably use one of the two remaining triple cities to continue it for a couple of points. But that's about it. My opponent drops a monastery. They don't have anything to do. I'm fortunate enough to grab a city cap. So, of course, I take 4 easy points and I restrict my opponent's city even further. And now suddenly the situation is looking not so bad. I am 9 points ahead on the scoreboard. I am a little bit down on blocked features. But basically, my opponent's city at the left is not enough to compensate for the difference on the scoreboard if I successfully connect to the field. So my opponent goes over here, restrict the city cap at the top, but I do draw the one remaining city cap that goes there, and I have an interesting decision right now. So of course, I'm going over here. The question is, do you take 4 points or do you go for the field? And I figured that if I go to the field, it's relatively secure. But my opponent could block the field entry, and then suddenly I have 12 points over here for the field, which is of course great. But my opponent has 9 points for the field over here and still has 1 meeple with which they can score some quick points. They could, I don't know, get 2 points for the road, here and there, continue their city a little bit, and at the final move, they could lie down for 6 points on this field over here up top. And I figured that this could enough for them to win. So I figured that I should not be spending my last meeple here, and just scored 4 points for the city. But this allows them a brilliant tactic. They go over here and they drop a farmer. There are 2 tiles with which they can take over the entire field. I have some way how I can reconnect to the field, but it is not always possible. And I have also a way how we could block the field entry, but again, it's like really relies on a specific combination of tiles. So now my plan for winning the game is just simply scoring the points elsewhere. I drop a monastery because there isn't really anything much I could have done. They immediately complete the connection. I get 1 extra point by, unifying the 2 cities. They just get 1 extra point for their city, and I have my choices here. I could have like either a 6-point road or a 6-point field. I went for the road because I prefer roads. And you're going to see the final result in just a second. The game ends in a tie, 82-82. There was a time when I was ahead by a lot, there was a time when green was ahead by a lot, but in the end, it all evened out. So this is what online Carcassonne at the 800 plus level is like. Well, actually, I think it is really the only game in existence where both players are rated over 800. That's really the sole reason why I wanted to make this video, just because I hadn't ever witnessed that before. However, you can see that there were some mistakes and imprecisions in this game, especially on my side, when I was unnecessarily trying to finish my city. But this just goes to show you that there's still a lot of room for improvements and growth in competitive online Carcassonne. And I do believe that with perfect play, a human could quite easily reach 900, and maybe an engine, if we were to ever make one. So if any developers are watching this, do make a Carcassonne engine. We really need that. That would be really cool. They do have this for my other minesports. Then probably that engine could reach a rating up to 1,000. That would be my estimation. I would really want to see that though. But for now, this is what we have. The only game that I remember with an average rating above 800. Hopefully you've learned something or enjoyed it in other ways. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you soon.